What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fourth and Frames, one of the fantasy football podcasts here at fantasyandframes.com. In this hour, we're going to be covering some offense for you. I know we're coming at you a day later than we normally are on Wednesdays. This is Thursday for those who are listening in podcast form. But you know what? We're going to do our due diligence and make sure that you get all the information that you need to know to get you ready for week 6 of the fantasy football season and get you those W's. Of course, during the course of the show, if you have any start-sit questions, send them your way. And again, we'll be answering those again on the 4-Eyed pregame show on Sunday. Before we get to that, let's just go around the frames and just see how everyone's doing. Brian Ford, let's start with you this week. How are you doing today, man?
I am pretty well. Looking forward to Friday tomorrow. Can I just say that I'm in 4th place in the fish division in Scott
Nice.
Fish Bowl.
Nice.
There's 4-way tie. There are 4 teams that are 4-1. I'm 4th place by points. I'm 1 point behind Sigmund Bloom. Sigmund, I'm coming for you.
Very nice.
Where's
Nate,
Bender? He talks a lot about it. He says it's one of the most fun leagues that he's ever been in. He says you guys' group chat is phenomenal, and how could it not be? Everybody has a love for fish, which is kind of nice. It's probably one of the lone divisions that actually everybody got put in because I think they really love the band more so than I have no problem with Steve Miller band. I like Steve Miller, but we're not collectively getting a chat going talking about our love for the Joker.
Yeah, Bender is in 7th place
now. Second Bender.
Nice. Yeah. Speaking of which, Howard, we'd love to have you on the show one day. Right. Nate, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I don't have any awesome Scott Fishbowl updates. Unfortunately, my team's not the greatest. I actually probably might have set a record. I'd have to do a lot of digging, but I believe that I probably have the fewest amount of points scored by quarterbacks collective in Scott Fishbowl history. I have now scored negative points combined 2 of the weeks.
Ooh.
Negative combined both quarterbacks. That's a lot. Yeah, Justin Fields killed me 1 week. Even having Tyler Heineke drafted from, I drafted him hoping that he was going to contribute, and he's only done enough to keep me just afloat. But I'm still 2-3 and not too far out of 6th. But que sera.
Yeah, I too am not doing awesome in Scott Fishbowl. I'll tell you where I'm killing it though, which is funny because we had this conversation about my choice in roster construction back in August. Going into last week, I was 25th overall in Rasbowl. And just to give you, Brian, a heads up of what's going on there. Most people, when you're building your team and you're constructing your roster, you want to get a good mix of, running backs, wide receivers. I don't know if that's a novel concept that you've heard before. Getting wide receivers and running backs is a good thing. Well, during the course of the draft, I'm like, let me get some boomer bust wide receivers. Let me just fill out my roster. And we get to the end of the draft, and I'm like, oh, damn it. I only drafted 2 running backs, Derrick Henry and James Robinson. And fortunately, heading into last week, those 2 guys went off and have continued to go off. And if it wasn't for Calvin Ridley being out last week, who knows, I may still be in the top 20. I'm 47th overall, which is still the highest I've been ever in this tournament, just using 2 running backs. So keeping the faith alive that I could make a good push here for that in that tournament and set.
I'm 69th, in case anybody's wondering.
Nice.
Nice. Exactly. But here, if this is the, I guess, I'm 2nd overall in the IDP championship hosted by IDP guys. I'm undefeated and right behind Joey the Tooth.
Okay.
I think is who's in first. Yeah. And so in my division, we had the number 2, I guess, and number 4 overall. We played each other last week, and I came out victorious. And so, yeah. So there we go. We'll save the IDP talk for the next show, but
sure. But good stuff as always. Let's get in some news. We got some news with Damian.
Yep, Damian
Williams. He's out with COVID this week. So Herbert is now the replacement. What's his first name? Khalil Herbert.
Khalil Herbert. Yeah.
Are you trusting Khalil Herbert? If Damian Williams was if you were the Montgomery manager, and then you went out and you got Damian Williams, and now he's out, Was what you saw from Khalil Herbert in terms of moving the ball down the field last week enough to be like, yeah, I'm going to put him in my starting roster. Now, taking into account that, it depends on what your roster looks like. But let's say you have other options at running back. Are you putting any stock into that, Nate?
I mean, considering there's no real threat to touches, Ryan Nall is the only other running back on Chicago's active roster right now. I mean, he only played 52% of snaps last week, so I think that number is going to go up. He had 18 carries, 75 yards. A lot of that was in garbage time. But, I mean, on a volume-based scenario, it's at this point with the bye weeks and everything else going on, I don't think you're going to have much of a choice other than to play him, right, Brian?
I like Khalil Herbert. I think he's a good player. I drafted him in several dynasty leagues in the rookie drafts. 18 for 75, not bad last week. He out-carried Damian Williams, who was the, apparent RB1 in going into last week. But, for the sake of playing devil's advocate here, he only got 75 yards against a team that's not a great rushing defense. He's a rookie. Might be a negative game script against Green Bay. I don't like the Chicago offense right now. I'd have to be, especially in a redraft and in a 12-teamer with one flex. Let's just say, I would be reluctant to play Khalil Herbert.
Got a question on Facebook from Malcolm Merriweather, real quick. Pick 2 to start. OBJ, Kadarius Toney, Tim Patrick, Julio Jones. Julio Jones getting in his first full practice in, I think, 2 weeks today, which is boding well for him starting against the Bills, which I believe they're Monday Night Football. Odell Beckham Jr. Man. Yeah, and of course, Kadarius Toney, we all saw how well he played last week, just getting peppered with targets left and right. People probably spent quite amount of fab on him this week. And Tim Patrick, good old reliable Tim Patrick, just chugging along, doing his thing. If I'm chasing upside, though, I'm going Kadarius Toney and Julio Jones. No Galladay this week, and I know Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton may be coming back, but at this point, I'm looking at rapport. Another thing is who's going to be the quarterback? Is Daniel Jones going to be cleared in time? Is it going to be Mike Glennon? If it's Glennon, I think Glennon has more of the rapport with Kadarius Toney than Daniel Jones. But that being said, Daniel Jones had to throw to somebody, and Kadarius Toney was catching all these passes, and quarterbacks like it when their receivers catch their passes. It's a little favoritism going on here. I don't know, but those would be my 2 picks. What about you, Nate?
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I just we get burnt by OBJ too often. Everything leads up. He should have no business not getting 9 targets, 10 targets, and turning that into some production, but he doesn't. And so at some point you just have to wash your hands of it, right? And like you said, Tim Patrick, reliable, but I'm probably looking at more of the ceiling with both of those 2.
Brian, let's have you answer this one again from Malcolm. Pick 2, Myles Gaskin, Kadarius Toney, Alex Collins. Now, just to give you some, info on Alex Collins, Chris Carson didn't practice this week. There kind of is looking like he may not play again. Going against Pittsburgh. I don't know if that changes your opinion. What are your thoughts here, Brian?
Well, first of all, glad to see Malcolm again. We like our return customers. Can I just say, first of all, both these questions gross. I don't know if I know it's bye week time, and these are some bad options. Miami's got Jacksonville, and Gaskin had a bounce back game. I think it was 10 catches for 74 yards and a couple scores.
I mean, you look what
I don't think Seattle's going to be moving the ball much with Geno. He didn't look too bad against the Rams, but I'm kind of staying away from that situation. I think Gaskins and Toney.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with that. Look, is it just me, or is it now this time of year where we're 6 weeks into the season, and I feel like everybody wants the next, one-hit wonder or breakout player for that season. And how just think how many people out there just emptied the fab on Alex Collins last week just because they were scared about Chris Carson and the whole neck issue that could be a thing, which maybe it turns out to be a thing. But there are question marks with Alex Collins with Russell Wilson there, right? So now you take away, somebody who could potentially open up some running lanes with Geno Smith. Yeah, I agree with you there, Brian. Awesome questions though, Malcolm, although they are gross because it's bye-week season.
And he's a Raiders fan, so clearly that obviously means that, and it's not to do with anything with John Gruden. It's the fact that I'm a Chiefs fan, so clearly I'm hoping to give him good advice, but announcing he wants to be wrong just to spite him.
Let's go to the Monday night matchup.
Like, thanks a lot for coming back. I'm like, the team sucks.
See you on Sunday, Malcolm. Unless you have some more questions, then fire away. So as I mentioned earlier, Julio Jones back at practice. AJ Brown coming back last week, severely underperformed. I think he only had like 5.9 fantasy points and half PPR scoring. Don't quote me, but I think it was something that low. It's gross. I have a situation here, and maybe I'll ask you two guys. I picked up Kadarius Toney, and I have AJ Brown. My other two wide receivers are Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. Do I roll the ball with upside and go Kadarius Toney and swap out AJ Brown going against a Bills team that did a really good job of kind of limiting Kansas City last week on Monday Night Football, or do I go, well, I spent a third round pick on AJ Brown or a second round pick on AJ Brown. Like if he's playing, you play him. What do you think, Nate?
Man,
granted, draft capital doesn't mean anything at this point anymore. This late into the season.
I still think I'd have a hard time not starting AJ Brown over Toney, but my God, Buffalo has done just an outstanding job. I mean, 250 yards receiving on the season allowed. I don't believe they've given up a touchdown yet to opposing wide receivers. Oh no, I'm sorry, take that back. My bad. I was looking at the running back receptions, but still, you're talking about. Nope. Take that back. They still have not allowed the more than 0.7 touchdowns per game. So it's under a touchdown a game. Yeah,
it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I think the key here is if Julio's back, right? If they can somehow divide the attention of the secondary, that's kind of only the saving grace here for AJ Brown, which is what I'm thinking this week. What about you, Brian? Kadarius Toney or AJ Brown?
It's a tough one. Going into the season, we wouldn't think that this would be, a tough option. Let's assume Daniel Jones is quarterbacking. Buffalo has been so good on defense, and I think to try to stay in the game, they're gonna try to feed Derrick Henry 75 friggin' carries. I might be staying away from Tennessee receivers this week, and I'll gamble on Kadarius Toney. I know I would never have said this, like a few weeks ago, but one more interesting thing though, through week 4 or 5 last year, AJ Brown was underperforming, broke out against the Bills. So
fun fact.
Yeah,
how about that, Malcolm.
I also don't like having a sorry to.
No, you're good.
I don't like waiting until Monday night for a person coming off of injury who, even though he's gotten in practices, that surprise game time decision, maybe sit or anything, can just burn you because you're not going to pick up anybody. You're not going to have, too many
Chester
options. Exactly. And, then it becomes Chester Rogers or Kadarius Toney. But going back to Malcolm's question here, go ahead.
Yeah, do you think it's smart to pick up Marlon Mack now? Yes. Hope to get if the rumors are him going to Kansas City, then for the short term, yeah. I don't know what CEH's usage is going to come back, whether or not he's going to need more time after his it's MCL sprain, I believe. Yes, you saw Monday night. You saw against the Colts. I mean, the limited action he saw, he was averaging, I think, 9.4 yards per carry. So feeling pretty confident about that, especially if he goes to Kansas City. So I think, anybody else have any news and notes that we should tell the Word fans about, or do you think we should jump into our prime matchups of the week?
No, there's, I do have some news as far as an area that we don't talk about often, but I think this is key to understanding some of the week. Offensive line news is that, Lane Johnson is out again this week with personal issues. I wish him all the best, of course, not knowing what's going on, but that's a big blow to that offensive line. Joe Thuney for the Chiefs has been out. If he's out, that interior front line, the Matt Ioannidis and Deron Payne at Washington front line, it's a big loss potentially right there. And the two biggest losses of the week probably might get brushed under the rug is that Frank Ragnow, the starting center for the Detroit Lions, is out for the season with turf toe surgery. That's huge loss for the for one of the top 2 or 3 rated centers in all of football. And then the final one is the top rated center through Pro Football Focus. That's Brandon Linder for Jacksonville. And most people are going to say who, but you lose your starting center on an offense with a rookie quarterback and a team that's starting to run the ball effectively now over the last 3 weeks. We've seen them transition from a pass heavy attack really in week 1 to more of a running attack over the last 2 to 3. You take away their center and you're going to see some discombobulation with Jacksonville. So I think we should temper a little bit of our James Robinson expectations. Jorge, I know that affects you in about 37 leagues, so I apologize, but it's the truth. And last but not least is Laramie Tunsil has a thumb injury. They say thumbs are important supposedly to blocking defensive ends from killing your quarterback. Not that Houston had any positive momentum anyway, but again, it's something to take note of.
Did he injure the thumb lighting up the bong or?
Maybe.
Yeah, for those out there. Going back to what you're saying about the center for Jacksonville, that's interesting. I did not hear about that. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people may not realize this but the center also has a lot of control in calling audibles and what they see on the field also. It's like kind of the communication between a quarterback and a center is, kind of sacred besides, the quarterback reaching under your junk and getting a football. Like they actually communicate and actually, plan out what they're seeing on offense from opposing defenses. And sometimes you'll have the center overrule the quarterback because they're more experienced. And that could be a situation what you're having here in Jacksonville where they have a rookie quarterback, they have an experienced center, and now you lose that voice in your ear. I agree with that. That could spell a little bit of trouble. Even more so. I mean, how much trouble can they get in? They haven't won a game in 20 straight games. But that notwithstanding. All right, let's get into some prime matchups of the week. Let's start, Brian, we'll go with you. Let's start with quarterback. Who's the quarterback that you are interested in? Which, by the way, for those who have not, head over to fantasyandframes.com. FF Chalupa Batman on Twitter, a.k.a. Zach, put out his quarterback and tight end matchups, giving you a few tight end and quarterback options that have good upside this week. So head over to Fantasy and Frames and read that. Okay, let's start with you, Brian, quarterback.
So I'm going to talk to you about a couple folks before I land on one. I mean, obviously, Josh Allen, juicy matchup. You're starting him if you have him, so nothing really to talk about there. A guy who is going up against a defense that is not great and has good receiving options, including the running back, Ben Roethlisberger. A guy who, until Nate took a crap all over this with the injured center, Lawrence, Miami ranks 29th against quarterbacks. He's spreading the ball around. But I am going to go with the gross bye-week injury. If you lost Russell Wilson or if you're in a 14-team superflex, you could do worse than Davis Mills against the Colts. Threw for over 300 yards against a Belichick defense last week. Indianapolis got lit up by Lamar Jackson and the Ravens on Monday night. You could do worse if you're streaming or if you need a super flex spot.
I didn't realize he put up 312 passing yards last week. That is nuts. Nate, who do you got for a running back?
Ironically enough, as Brian so eloquently put, taking a crap on the Jacksonville center, Brandon Linder. Despite that knowledge, I still think a prime matchup is James Robinson against this Miami team. If you look at Miami, I mean, so here's the facts are the facts. Miami's allowed the second most points to opposing running backs. If you look back, they gave up 1878 to Cincy, 18 for 149 to Tennessee. And, these big games, despite not being involved in the pass attack, James Robinson has that reception upside over the last, really, going forward. And we think that maybe there's a chance that they've gotten away a little bit from that pass to run quotient that is successful for the passing game, but there's involvement with him in the receiving game as well. So if he continues on this trend, or if Jacksonville continues on this trend, where if you look in week 1, they had a 56-17 pass to run ratio, and that was not going to hold up if they're going to keep Trevor Lawrence upright. I mean, you had to hope that. Then again, this is Urban Meyer. We don't know what the hell's going to happen. He didn't trust that he had James Robinson, and he drafted ATN and still wanted to give Carlos Hyde touches for crying out loud. But Carlos Hyde is being phased out. Luckily, he only had 6 snaps last week. We're seeing a 39% pass to run ratio, or 39% rushing, which benefits James Robinson. Miami allows the 4th most targets to opposing running backs. So if Jacksonville's seeing this, hopefully they're thinking, okay, Miami's susceptible through the air to our running back. Let's get James Robinson involved with this. And most importantly, they allow the most red zone touches to opposing running backs. Now, then it probably is happenstance. You can't always predict how many times they're going to be in the red zone. But I like seeing a defense that gives up a lot of red zone touches to opposing running backs, because if that bodes well, I'm correct here. Touchdowns do count in fantasy scoring for running backs.
That's the rumor. I don't want to confirm yet, but
I'll Google that, and get back to you.
Please do. I'll look on. Oh, damn it! What was the other one? What was the other search site that was with Google? It was
Bing.
Bing, yeah, Bing sucked.
Alta Vista back in the day.
Bing,
remember Ask Jeeves back in the day?
Ask Jeeves, yeah. We should ask Jeeves. Score touchdowns count. If they do, again, a lot of this was, based around them having Linder at center. That does hurt things a little bit, but I still love the prime matchup. I'll go with just one little surprise twist. My number 1 running back on the week, if it wasn't so easy to say as a prime matchup, is I have Najee Harris ranked as my number 1 RB going into this week against Seattle. I think he just destroys them. 150 and 2 touchdowns and maybe another 50 through the air and a score.
All right.
It's funny, going to Pittsburgh for a second. A lot of people I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I've seen some questions out there if James Robinson's going to get more involved because Juju's not there, even though they play different positions or different locations on the field. My answer to that is no, don't worry about that. The 3 people who have been leading the team in receptions are still there. Juju wasn't really helping that much. You got Najee Harris, you got Deontay, and you got Claypool. Like, there you go. Those are your skill players right there. Brian, wide receiver, who you got?
Okay, so the obvious option, for me, a bounce back week for Terry McLaurin against Kansas City, ranking 24th against wide receivers in a game that I think could kind of sneak into like a high scoring game. However, we have Tyreek Hill is not expected to play, so that may dampen that outcome. But along the lines of Mills, Indianapolis 30th against wide receivers. I don't think Chris, who the hell are you more, and Chris Conley are going to be the beneficiaries. Again, I think you could see a big week from Brandon Cooks, and I'm going to throw a question to Jorge here.
Sure.
I see in some deeper leagues people adding Washington's DeAndre Carter. He's getting some looks.
Yeah.
I think if you're in a deep league with multiple flexes or you got some injuries, it might be interesting. What do you like DeAndre Carter as a Washington fan?
So he's to confirm what you said. Yeah, he is getting looked at. I've seen him picked up in not so deep leagues just because of the bye week and just because of this particular matchup this week. I still think though, the people that you should it's 2 people you should feel comfortable starting at receiving options, which could be, the tight end, running back, or wide receiver, are McLaurin and Ricky Seals-Jones has actually been getting a lot of targets this week. I think he has a good matchup against Kansas City, good red zone option. He gets, even when Logan Thomas was on the field, Ricky Seals-Jones, especially in the end zone, was getting a lot more looks his way from Taylor Heineken, excuse me. So I think those are 2 ways to go. But yes, those are my thoughts there with Washington.
Okay.
Nate, for tight end, rounding us out.
Surprisingly enough, I feel like tight end was actually a pretty good matchup to look at this week for a number of different lesser ranked tight ends. Going into tonight, if we'd done this last night, Zach Ertz was my prime matchup. I mean, you look, no Goddard. Tampa Bay allows the 6th most points to opposing tight ends. Philly's target share to tight ends is 26%, which ranks in the top 3 in the NFL. Philly ranks 7th in average yards to the tight end, and there's no Levante David. All those things added up. If there's time, what time is it now? 7:29. The game's starting, so you probably don't have time to put Ertz in your lineup if you do. But at the end of the day, that was going to be the option. So I'll pivot to one of my favorite players in the NFL. He gets to face the most lenient defense to opposing tight ends, the Houston Texans. That is Ali Cox. Ali Cox finally makes his Fantasy and Frames appearance again this year after about a 5-week hiatus. Rightfully so. If we look at what he's done, not on the season, but over the last 3 weeks now, he has taken a command of that target share of the tight ends over the last 3 weeks. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 2 touchdowns, 106 yards. He's the glimmer in Carson Wentz's eye, and I think that this is just another good chance to, it's touchdown dependent, but I like the upside for a touchdown against this poor Houston Texans team.
Speaking of tight end decisions, let me ask you guys a question. The Patriots, spent a lot of money bringing in Jonnu and Hunter Henry, more money to Jonnu. But Hunter Henry's been getting the end zone looks and is producing from a touchdown perspective. If you had to keep one on your roster, who would you feel like keeping? Let's start with you, Brian.
I happen to be a Jonnu truther, but I look at these first 5 weeks, and especially the last couple with Henry getting touchdowns in each. I'd have to drop Jonnu and keep Hunter Henry. I don't know really how I could justify it the other way around.
I guess it goes back to, are the touchdowns, do they help you in fantasy? Yeah, good point. All right, before we get going to our flex off for the week, I just want to give a shout out to Clay over at Dynasty Pandemic. Created a great website, dynastypandemic.com. It actually launched the day of the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio. And so we were there, and although we didn't get to meet him, or at least I didn't get to meet him, I've been conversing with him a lot. You can follow him at dpandemic_Clay. And so Dynasty Pandemic, what is it? I mean, obviously Dynasty's in the name. They have a lot of good Dynasty accounts you can follow there. Dynasty Trades, Dynasty and Chill, Dynasty Warzone. They got a Devi account, Devi Marketplace, Dynasty Happy Hour. And of course, us and Brian, you're now on Dynasty Pandemic, if memory serves me correctly. Dynasty Fever, correct?
Yes, the Dynasty Fever podcast that I do is featured on the homepage. Every time we have a new episode. I don't think episode 12 is up yet. I just gave him the MP3 last night, but yeah, we're on there.
I mean, it's a great website. You go there, you jump on their chat feed immediately, just start talking shop.
Yeah.
Really cool community there. They have an app you can find on Apple and Google. Just a really good atmosphere, great place to talk about fantasy football. If you have any aspirations of getting your content spread out there, that's a great place to go and have it do so. Clay does a good job of posting your stuff on Twitter and retweeting stuff out and just getting eyes on your content. So hit them up at dpandemic_Clay or follow them at Dynasty Pandemic and head over to dynastypandemic.com today to just join a really cool community. And with that, let's get into our flex offs for this week. First bye week edition we're having. Let's get into it. Let's start with the quarterback position. When I saw the rundown for this show, which by the way, thank you very much, Nate. This hits close to home because on one hand, I'm a fan of one player because they're the quarterback of my football team that I root for. On the other hand, you're going against a quarterback that I picked up in a lot of leagues to have him start this week, so for good reason. So it's going to be interesting. So Nate is going to be in the corner of Taylor Heineke, and Brian, you're going to be in the corner of Carson Wentz. Let's start with you, Nate. Why is Taylor Heineke the start you should be making this week at quarterback?
I would start with his days with the St. Louis Battlehawks in the XFL and work my way into the NFL and talk about it. He was kind of a little cult following with that, but unfortunately for Carson Wentz, he has to go up against the quarterback, going up against a defense that is, well, what's a nice way to put this? Atrocious. It hits close to home, Jorge. It hits really close to home. And the fact that I watched the Chiefs defense just get run up and down the field to the tune of 28 fantasy points a game to opposing quarterbacks. I also watched Washington football team allow 27 fantasy points a game to the quarterback, which tells me that this is going to be a high scoring game, most likely with Washington in a negative game script because, well, no offense, Casey's offense is a little bit more prolific than the football teams. But
even without Tyreek Hill, if he doesn't play?
I think he's going to play, though. I really do. I'm not as worried about that. But that's just reading what I've read. Obviously, I can't be clairvoyant. So I have to assume Tyreek. Even without Tyreek, yeah, I will say it takes a lot away from that. But I still see this being an air attack game as a whole. Outside of week 1 and week 5, he's had no less than two touchdown passes in every week. Week 1, clearly he was just getting acclimated. Last week was a bad matchup. There's no doubt about that. That was a rough one. And, New Orleans defense is fantastic. Marshon Lattimore did an excellent job of shutting down Terry McLaurin. Guess what? The Chiefs don't have Marshon Lattimore. They don't have, I wish they had a lot of the players from the Saints, but they don't. The rushing upside of Taylor Heineke is there. He's now had, if you look on the season, he has 25 attempts for $127 and a touchdown. Not anything you're going to write a story about, but it's always nice to have that little bit of rush upside because, Carson Wentz has it, but I fear for his life every time he gets past the line of scrimmage or about. He's top 10 in rushing attempts, top 10 in rushing yards, top 10 in touchdowns. Give me the negative game script. Give me the poor defense. Give me the fact that Casey's allowed the most rushing attempts and the second most rushing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks, and you have the recipe for a sweet QB1 potential in Taylor Heineke.
All right, Brian, that was a good argument from Nate. Why should people be playing Carson Wentz over Taylor Heineke?
Yeah, Nate always comes correct in the flex offs. Yeah,
does his research
for sure. So Carson Wentz, we talked a little bit earlier about the woeful defenses of both Houston and Indianapolis. So we have a possibility of a higher scoring game, of a back and forth game. Wentz just threw for over 400 yards on Monday night and against the Ravens, who are, not the defense that we expected them to be, but are not as bad as the Texans, I'd say. So, there's potential there. His connection with Pittman has looked really good. I think, he'll be able to hit him a lot. He'll be able to hit Hines and or Jonathan Taylor coming out of the backfield. Houston ranks 18th against quarterbacks. I mean, Taylor Heineke is a good choice too. I don't see the game being as high scoring or as negative a game script for Washington as some people think. Last I saw, Tyreek Hill didn't practice today, and the quote I saw is not expected to play. So, it might be a situation where it's not as, offensive a game as we expect. Or we could see Washington really try to lean on Antonio Gibson to keep Mahomes off the field. So I think there's some ways that the Heineke matchup could go south, whereas I don't think there's a way that things don't go well for Wentz against the Houston Texans. And I believe, and they're at home too. So that's all I got. Let's go Wentz.
All right. So I'm looking up here. Obviously, Carson Wentz had a monster game on Monday night with the 400 yards passing, like you mentioned. He also had some great running backs do some good things. Jonathan Taylor, obviously, he had that 74-yard reception. You look at not really a Naheem Hines involvement in the game, but you saw Marlon Mack do his thing. I'm looking at opportunity, or not so much opportunity, but proven production. And when I'm looking at the Texans defense, they allow the 7th most rushing yards to a running back. I don't see this Texans offense putting up a lot of points to the point where, like Baltimore did, to the point where Carson Wentz has to throw it that many times. Although I still think he does just enough for you to get you those fantasy points. On the flip side, you look at the Chiefs in passing, or excuse me, total yards overall, they allow the 2nd most yards to opposing offenses, which is, I didn't really think that they were that high. And so you have Washington, all their weapons, sans Logan Thomas, are there ready to go. JD McKissick probably going to have a good day if Kansas City jumps out to a big lead. I want to say it's a matter of numbers, and I think these are both great options for you to start if you're going to start them this week.
Want me to add a few other numbers to help make Brian's case for you? He has some pretty sterling numbers. So he's taken on 3 bottom 10 teams in the NFL to opposing quarterbacks. He's taken on Seattle, who's 21st, Tennessee's 22nd, Miami's 27th. In those 3 games, he has 250 yards passing in one of them, under 200 in another, and a shade over 200 in the third, with 4 touchdowns and an average of 6 yards per reception. Does that help his case, or did that hurt? I wasn't sure what I was trying to do there.
I think that was a very tactical decision on your part.
Yeah.
But man, Heineke looked really bad last week. And again, granted, there's not, L'Jarius Sneed is not somebody I'm scared of in the secondary for Kansas City. So by a smidge, I'm going to go Heineke, but I still think Wentz is a good option. So congrats, Nate. You won the first one. Let's get a running back. Nate, another waiver wire ad this week that you'll be in the corner. We're talking about Devontae Booker, assuming Saquon does not play, which is, I think, assured at this point. And Brian, ironically, you're going to take Kansas City running back Darrell Williams. So Nate, let's start with you this week. Brian, let's since Nate started first last time, why don't you go first this time?
Simply by the fact that Darrell Williams went for $66 in Fab in my home league, and Devontae Booker went for $13. Case closed. No.
Case closed.
I was surprised Williams went for that much. So. Me too. Williams has looked good in stints here and there. He was getting red zone looks even when CEH was playing. I think again, if I don't think Tyreek Hill will play. So I think they're going to probably lean on the run a little more. And when they have leaned on the run, and when the game script was positive, CEH did really well. I think he had a couple 100-yard games. So I think, Williams has a shot to get you some points. Washington ranks 23rd against running backs. So there's, a good matchup in his favor. And with the Giants game, Booker saw a few receptions last week, but I just see the Giants trailing the Rams, and Daniel Jones having to try to chuck it a little more than being able to lean on Booker. So I think if I'm looking for a safer bet, I'm looking at Darrell Williams.
All right, Nate, Devontae Booker. Why should you start him over Darrell Williams?
Well, you shouldn't. You should always start a Chief over a Giant. That just goes without saying.
All right, case closed.
I can see that, but unfortunately,
hashtag analysis.
As indicated by my lack in Scott Fishbowl, I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about all the time. So I'll do my best to give you a reason why Devontae Booker against this formidable Rams defense is justifiable. It starts with who took over the lion's share of the work last week when Saquon was out. Clearly that was Devontae Booker. He had 16 attempts once Saquon left. What he did with those is he had 16 attempts for 42 yards and a score. Nothing to write home about except for that. I think the scoring touchdown is the theme that we're finding here, which is a good start. You did mention he's not exactly the most prolific pass catcher, despite the 4 targets, which turned into 3 receptions, 16 yards, and again, a touchdown. But he, most importantly, if you ask me, he stayed in the game for 7. He had 7 pass blocking snaps. So it's not like he was completely taken off the field altogether. And that's a good sign going forward that they're going to trust in him to provide protection. And honestly, there's nobody else in that backfield that I'm even remotely concerned with in the way of rushing the ball or taking carries. Elijah Penny was played the second most snaps, I believe, at running back behind him. And Elijah Penny's a fullback. I'm not too concerned unless they really are throwing in the towel and they're just going to hand off to the fullback in this game. I'm pretty certain Booker's going to get as close to 100% of the touches as possible of any running back there. The Rams do have one weakness. If there's a chink in the armor, the one thing you can look at is they allow an 83% catch rate to opposing running backs, which has led to 30 of 36 targets for 239 yards and a touchdown. Hopefully the Giants are seeing that and thinking that they're susceptible to the passing game. And they allow the 10th most red zone touches to opposing running backs. Very similar to what we've talked about earlier, getting the ball in the red zone, always a plus. And they allow the 3rd most goal-to-go attempts to the running back. Again, probably happenstance, probably not something that's sustainable, but I like to see that, teams are getting into the red zone as limited times as you can against the Rams. That just means that it seems like I don't think they're going to trust, if it's Daniel Jones starting, for a quarterback sneak coming off of the wobbly legs. I think they're going to probably trust it and putting it into Devontae Booker's hands. So Devontae Booker will barely outscore Darrell Williams in week 6.
Okay. So, the old adage in fantasy football is volume is key or volume is king. I never understood which one was key or king, whatever. I guess both the same thing. Yeah. Volume is important. Here we go. Volume is important in fantasy football. My concern with Booker, and I say this full disclosure, I have no choice but to start him in one league. So he is my RB2. I am very concerned, especially if Slayton and Shepard come back this week along with Tony and no Galladay. Notice I'm not talking about Evan Ingram. Oh, he had such an opportunity last week and just not great. I just don't know whether or not the Giants are going to be in a position where they have to lean on the receiving prowess of Devontae Booker to get into what should be a blowout of a game for Los Angeles. Conversely, with Darrell Williams, if the reports are true that Tyreek Hill is trending towards not playing, they can only lean on Travis Kelce only so many times. Darrell Williams, he wasn't, back when Kareem Hunt was the running back and he missed a few games. Darrell Williams always came off the bench and played really well in the receiving game as well as the passing game. You look at passing attempts in the red zone. I want to say that Patrick Mahomes ranks, where does he rank? 5th in passing attempts in the red zone. They can only throw it to, Travis Kelce so many times. I think this is going to be a Darrell Williams game if Tyreek Hill doesn't start. Both the Giants and Washington basically on the running game, with the running game, allow the most yards. They're really They're back-to-back in allowing yards to the running back. I think one is 582 on the season, one's 562. So really close ones here, but I trust the offense to get the ball moving with Kansas City than I do with the Giants. And I feel Darrell Williams' usage will be going up there. So give me Darrell Williams. Brian, congratulations. So now you guys are tied. And let's finish off with wide receivers. Nate, Rondale Moore, Arizona Cardinals is yours. And we've talked about him all episode. Brian, Kadarius Toney is yours for the Giants. Nate, why should people be taking Rondale Moore?
So, we all know talent, explosiveness isn't an issue. The issue with Rondale Moore has been opportunity. Opportunity knocks. What do? You answer the door. And who's standing on the doormat that says, please wipe your feet. Welcome to Hogwarts, whatever your doormat says. I'm repeating those because those are two that I believe that we have at our house. Something
That's awesome.
goofy like that. Yeah, it is what it is. But you answer it, and the opportunity is starting to present itself. We go around the team. You look at what's happened. Most recently is Max Williams going down with that devastating knee injury. Now, Max Williams is not exactly the person that you normally would go to and say, oh, Max Williams is down. Rondale Moore is going to definitely step up. But what it does is it does open up a little bit more targets. And all you need is just, with Rondale Moore, you need 2-3 more targets a game. And you have the makeup of a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for the rest of the season. So why do we only need a few extra receptions or a few extra targets? Is because it slowly started to uptick where we've seen Rondale Moore take over Christian Kirk in the total target and snap share competition, if you want to call it that, in Arizona. He's now tied with Christian Kirk for the second most receptions on the team with 21. He has an 87% reception rate. He has 6 rushing attempts. And if you go week by week and look at the snap counts, in week 1, he had 14. Week 2 was 24. Then it was 14, 16, and most recently 20. Now, that up and down might mean something, but the most important thing to take about that entire kind of parabolic curve is that finally, for the first time in week 5, he had more snaps than Christian Kirk. It's always been DeAndre Hopkins and AJ Green, and then followed by Christian Kirk or Max Williams. Christian Kirk, Max Williams. And in this case, it's now actually Rondale Moore that is seeing the second most wide receiver, the third most wide receiver snaps on that team. And I see that as a trend going in this game and forward. Look for Rondale Moore to get that, 6 to 7 target number, which can turn into 100 yards easily with that explosiveness.
All right, Brian, your turn. Kadarius Toney, why should you start him?
So let's start with Nate's Rondale Moore. Good choice this week. We look at them going up against Cleveland, who I believe might not have Clowney. And it had I thought, with my limited knowledge of defenses, had a pretty good pass rush and not too bad a secondary, but the Chargers ate them up. So I could see, Rondale Moore as a good flex option. My issue. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I completely avoided the Cleveland secondary in that, or not avoided, but even didn't even talk about it, and they are banged up really bad. I mean, Greg Newsome is out with a potential calf injury, like you mentioned. Clowney, Denzel Ward, Greedy Williams are all banged up. Man, I am not good at this. Flex off. You take advantage, beat me down. Kadarius Toney.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I'll do my best. So let's talk about Toney. We talked about Mike Glennon having a better rapport with him than Daniel Jones, and we saw last week as pretty much the only guy with Golladay down and Slayton and Shepard also gone. He went for 10 and 189. But he did that against a Dallas defense that's playing, better than people expected. And we have a guy on that defense who has 6 interceptions already. So he was able to show separation, get open. I think he's getting used to the pro game, and I think he's proving the fantasy community wrong, who was very down on Kadarius Toney relative to what NFL scouts were saying about his talent. But when Daniel Jones was quarterback, he still was on the uptick. He went for, I think, 6 and 78 against New Orleans, a game when Saquon was in. I think if you're looking at Toney, you're probably a little concerned that Shepard and Slayton might come back. I don't know how close to 100% they'll be, but Golladay will still be out. Saquon will still be out. Rams are 15th, middle of the pack against wide receivers, so it's not like it's a super tough matchup. At the same time, I think there will probably be a pretty negative game script for the Giants. I think Jones is going to have to chuck it, and I think Toney may be his best option. So as opposed to Rondale Moore, who again, is getting more snaps. But we've seen week to week on that team. 1 week it's Kirk, 1 week it's AJ Green. It's always D-Hop. Rondale Moore is maybe the third passing option on that team. I think Tony could very well be the primary in a game where the team's going to have to throw a lot. So close one, but give me Kadarius Toney.
So I'll start with the finish and then go to my explanation. I think Brian, you won this flex off because I'm a believer in Kadarius Toney and everything you just said. Here's the thing: I expect the Giants to have more of a need to chuck the ball than I do Arizona being able to chuck the ball against Cleveland. Cleveland, last week was an aberration, but their defense is really good. They've been leaning on James Conner. Granted, it's been in red zone opportunities only, very touchdown dependent, but they still go to him. Chase Edmonds may or may not be back. I don't know if he's trending towards playing or not. I have to look that up. But in any event, the defense scares me a little bit here. For the Giants and Kadarius Toney, let's think about this. Geno Smith came on the field at the 2-yard line when Russell Wilson went down, and within 4 plays, marched Seattle down the field against these very same Los Angeles Rams for a touchdown. That speaks volumes to me. And like we were saying, the chemistry between Glennon and Toney, or even Daniel Jones and Toney, Shepard and Slayton. Look, I'm not one to, talk about injuries here or there, but look, it always happens with these guys. You never know when something can flare up. Toney looked to be the main go-to guy there, although he has been battling an ankle injury all throughout the week.
Yes. Yeah.
That is a little bit of a concern also, but I look at, the third option in the receiving game for Arizona versus the potential top option for the Giants. So that's where I want to go with Kadarius Toney here. So overall, Brian, you win the flex off this week. Nate, you won last week, so congratulations. I'm 0-6. So there we go. Let's go to our bust for the week before we wrap up today's show. Let's start at the quarterback position. I'm going to go Justin Fields. I don't know if that's Justin Fields is playing like the detractors of Jalen Hurts wish he was. And you think about fantasy drafts, back in August. Oh, let's get the dual threat quarterback, the cheat code. Let me get the Trey Lance. Let me get the Justin Fields. How are you feeling about that now? How are you feeling about that, knowing that their stock got so inflated that you had to go and get them, especially in 2 quarterback leagues or redraft leagues who wanted to get their backup quarterback for those who have deep rosters that can allow for that? Not looking good. Not looking good. Just because they can run doesn't necessarily mean that they make good quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts is obviously an anomaly here. But against Green Bay, this pass rush, no, thank you. No Justin Fields. And to be honest with you, if you wanted to drop Justin Fields from your roster at this point of the season, I would not hate that move at all. Running backs, let's go. Or running back, I should say.
Obviously it's based upon playing. I think that right now Dalvin Cook is in line to play from all accounts, and I don't like it. I don't like the opportunity. I think the fact that this reoccurring ankle injury is something that could pop, rear its ugly head again during the game. It's not 100%. Alexander Madison, contrary to what we've all believed, is actually doing it right now with the touches. Carolina's number 1 against the run. I mean, they've allowed 365 yards on the season, with 7th best in the NFL. They've allowed 71 receiving yards to the running back position, which is 2nd in the NFL. Dalvin Cook, bread and butter, is obviously volume and reception upside, and then the touchdowns. And if you take away just a portion of all that with the breathing down the neck of Alexander Madison and the preservation of his ankle, I think Dalvin Cook is a scary play, especially as your RB1 this week.
That's a very good point. And just, throwing it out there, I was just looking at the schedule. After this week, week 7, that's their bye week. And so you have to ask yourself, is
Why?
Minnesota going to play him this week when you could rest him for 2 weeks? What would be the point of bringing him back if he's not 100%? But if he does play, I mean, again, what you just said, the chance there. Wide receiver, Brian?
Yeah, so I had a tough time with this one, finding one or two that are like very likely busts. So I looked at a few that all scare me at least a little bit. They're all going up against top 10 defenses against wide receivers as far as fantasy production. We talked about Thielen earlier, not producing. Carolina is a tough matchup. Julio's going up against Buffalo. They've been great on defense against every position. I would also be careful with Cortland Sutton against Las Vegas. That could be a more defensive game than we're expecting. They might lean on the dual running backs. And I would also be careful with Bengals wide receivers. Detroit is actually not that bad against wide receivers. Dan Campbell's got him biting kneecaps up there in Detroit. They lost 2 heartbreaker games to Baltimore and Minnesota. And if it is a positive game script for the Bengals, between Pirine and Mixon, who both got snaps and rushes last week, you could see them lean on them. So I would be careful with Bengals receivers too.
Nice. All right, well, that's going to wrap up our offensive show as opposed to our offensive show here at Fourth and Frames. So if you have any questions, hit us up on Twitter. You can find Nate at Nate Markham. You can find Brian at FFJunkie_ and me at Jorge B. Edwards, or you can DM or message the Fantasy and Frames account at Fantasy and Frames. Head over to fantasyandframes.com. Check out all of our articles, getting you ready for week 6 of the fantasy football season. One thing I will say about our articles that I really am proud of everybody for doing, we actually are holding ourselves accountable to the information that we're providing you. Better to know who you're getting your information from and why you should trust it. And we couldn't be more proud of the guys here and all the hard work that they're doing. So check that out. And then also our rankings are going to be up there for offense and IDP. And then, of course, come back on Sunday at 10 a.m. for the Four-Eyed pregame show, getting you ready at the last minute for week 6 of the fantasy football season. So for Nate, for Brian, I'm Jorge. See you all in a few minutes for the IDP show.